Hi everyone, I'm Madonna Guy, and you're here with the Natural Alternative Podcast. And we're here today with David Shield, Holistic Counsellor. Hi, David.
Oh, hi, Madonna. Hi, everyone.
So I had a little bit of a curly thought yesterday after one of our clients, and it made me realize that there's a lot of parents out there with parental guilt,
Hmm.
especially with kids who are, say, neurospicy, kids who are getting in trouble with school, kids who are having emotional stuff. And I think a lot of parents misinterpret, well, certainly for me as a kinesiologist, they can misinterpret what I'm saying about the emotions as it's their fault, which is not what I'm saying at all. When I'm sort of looking into different emotions and survival patterns and things when I'm doing kinesiology, my
Mm.
brain is purely going, okay, well, let's calm this stuff down. Let's calm
Mm.
this down. Life's hard enough without blaming it all on ourselves. So, anyway, that's what I thought we could have a bit of a chat about today.
Right. Hmm. So, particularly, so neurodiverse kids, particularly, there's always a lot of difficulty with kids who are different, who aren't conforming to the norm. And whether it's because of a neurodiverse issue, often they might have difficulties with other things that are causing social or family troubles. And that might be something like common things, things like maybe bedwetting or having constipation or bowel issues. And but also kids who are neurodiverse often have a lot of comorbidities as well. So, like for example, kids with ADHD often overlap with other sort of conditions, so that they end up with comorbidities.
Yeah.
And so, and some of these are also made more difficult by parents not understanding what to do,
Yes, absolutely.
because generally what we're trying to do as parents is to, because if you look at the emotional stages of development, you've got the early ones, which are what are they in
Bonding and
Erickson's model.
adaptation and things like that.
Right. Well, the middle two, they're about mainly conforming to social cues in the home environment, the school environment, sports environments, wherever they go. And it's about learning the cues of how to work with authority figures, and also how to adapt to what the other kids are doing. So if our kids are not working towards those cues, which will be normal if you've got a kid with ADHD or autism, and especially when they're younger, because when they're little, it's not very obvious so much.
Yeah.
And it's also not very obvious at all, because hardly anybody knows anything about it. It's even because the most likely way you'll hear about it is a teacher might say something to you, suggest something that, there's something, because the things that'll work with it'll be lower grades. And the other thing, it's likely that kids who are different will get bullied at school.
Yeah.
And that's hard to avoid, just because they're different, and the nature of the way kids are in those developmental stages, trying to sort of bunt everybody into conforming to doing the correct social behaviors. Now,
Yes.
kids who are neurodiverse just don't do that stuff. And then the patterns can get worse, because things like authoritarian parenting or authoritarian teaching make it much worse. And so schools, it's easier to be flexible at home if you're a parent, to be less authoritarian, because, well, once you work out they have an actual thing, like if you get a diagnosis or it's really obvious, because people don't even realize what the symptoms of these things are, and it's not
Yeah.
obvious at first, even if you've got a full set of symptoms, because how would you know? And so, unless you've had a kid with something like that already, it's not really obvious what it is. And so, so it can be very frustrating, and it can cause a lot of conflict in families, because you've got one kid not doing, like, just say you've already had two kids and they're relatively normal, and then you've got a third one who's got, say, ADHD or a bit of autism or something. Suddenly you've just got this bad kid who won't do, because it's like, well, the other kids are okay with the
Yeah.
way we did it, but this one isn't.
Yeah. So I'm
And the
parenting
nature
them
of
the same. What's going on?
That's right. But the nature of, say, just say it's an ADHD kid, they're often um, they're corrected 20 times more than other kids at home and at school, because they're constantly being redirected. because they're not able to focus in the same way as other kids do.
Yeah.
And that builds up to a type of frustration and can often end up in situations what's that one called? Oppositional defiance.
Oh, yeah.
They develop they develop a relationship with authority figures like parents and teachers where they don't trust them anymore.
Yeah.
Because even though it's unknown, it's like nobody's noticed that they have a significant difference in the way that they can focus, in the way they can follow through with things. And it's often masked at home by, well, that kid, you just put him on the iPad and they'll be okay.
Yeah.
And so it's like, so it often goes under the radar for a long time before it's even worked out.
Yeah, because it makes life easier if you just let the kid get onto the device and, for hours and hours on end. You're sort of almost avoiding seeing what their little personality would be like without hyper focusing on something.
I guess so, but also the reality is those kids also just get sick of being redirected. So actually, it's natural for them to want to go by themselves and just be somewhere where they're not being told what to do.
Yeah.
And I know that, and that's hard for people to understand, but it's the truth. They just want to be left alone
Yeah.
because when they're out socially, they're being corrected all the time.
Yeah.
And that's a really hard equation to work with as a parent. What to speak as a teacher, it must be even harder because as a parent, you've got, hopefully a lot of natural empathy so that when you notice there's something significant wrong and you seek help with it, generally the counseling point of view is to down regulate the family emotional stuff.
Yeah.
Because by the time someone has identified a problem, there might be years of difficult parenting. And it's not anybody's fault. It's an unexpected thing that happens in the world. Because just say if it's ADHD, I know the actual incidence of it's increasing like fairly rapidly.
Yeah.
And so, and that could be environmental factors. But another thing is that you can always seek a differential diagnosis because it could be developmental trauma. Like because so many things appear in the same way as ADHD. For example, if you get a really bad hit to the head a few times on the left-hand front side, and damaging the prefrontal cortex, you have identical symptoms to ADHD, right?
Yeah.
So because the prefrontal cortex, which is the executive functioning and integrating part of the brain, isn't working properly.
Yeah.
And so kids with ADHD, they're born with a slight deficit in that relation.
Mm.
And so they just can't do things like they do the first stage of a problem and can't get through to the third stage. And
Yeah.
they can
I was just thinking, Peter
and so
McCullough was talking recently about kids who end up with seizures after jibbity jabs, which is quite common,
right.
because we're deliberately stimulating the immune response.
Well, that's
Yeah,
always
yeah,
been
yeah,
an issue.
absolutely. I'm not saying anything, but what I'm saying is that the
Yeah,
ones
yeah.
who get the seizures, 1 in 3 have the potential for autism. So, it's
Oh, right.
massive, and I think that's why here in Australia we give Panadol at the same time, but Panadol doesn't stop the inflammation of the brain. So, so exactly being able to speak to someone like yourself and find those symptoms of inflammation of the brain or, is really important because if we're not even aware of the inflammation, because if we've got anger issues, if we've got cognition issues, if we've got autism or memory issues, we have inflammation in the brain. Like those are all signs of
Right.
inflammation in the brain. And
Hmm.
again, I know you talk to people through breathing exercises and all sorts of things that help to calm, that inflammation down.
No, well, mainly it's working with the parents. Because so with ADHD counselling, the first and also autism similar, the first step's parental education.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? It's not counselling the kid first. It's actually educating the parent on the specific, type of thing and the specific type of adjustments that need to be made. And
Right.
that's not available. And because that's not available to everybody, and I know from other people who do counselling, that's often not the first approach being used. But the truth is, the parents need to understand what's going on. And then it's nobody's fault. But if you understand what's going on and you realize, oh, this kid, I need to compensate a little bit more and give them a little bit more free rein just because they're
Yeah.
not, and it's not, and it's, and whatever the cause is, like, because, there's different opinions on this in the science and in the counselling world. And so it's well known that, so they say that it's genetic or generational.
Uh-huh.
And
I disagree with
they
that, but
say that,
anyway.
well, I'm saying this is one opinion, and I might
Yes, I
not
know.
agree with this. I'm just saying this is what they're saying.
Yep.
And so they're saying the first generation will be that one of the parents has some type of toxic thing when they conceive,
That I
right?
agree with.
So,
That's not generational,
well,
that's still
but that's what
environmental.
they say,
Yeah,
and it is environmental, and they put, and this is how the first generation starts. This is what they say, and the only thing they'll attribute it to is lead, but the type of thing that lead poisoning does, we know that other types of poisoning also do to the brain. So
absolutely.
it kind of starts with like I've got a neurodiverse kid, and when he was conceived, I was working in a toxic environment in an India importers, where I'm pretty sure that it, there's I got methyl bromide poisoning working there, and I'm pretty sure I was in that environment when he was conceived, and he has some ADHD. And
Yeah, right.
so
Yep.
and then the generational thing they say that, well, if the kid's got ADHD, 30% likelihood that one of the parents has it. And when you look at that, it's often really easy. It's like, oh yeah, that's true. Like when you know a few people, you go, oh yeah, like yeah. Right.
Yeah.
So this genetic thing isn't completely unfounded. There's some type of, and another problem is a lot of developmental traumas also have the same very similar symptoms to ADHD. And so there's several things that can cause the same issues actually with the prefrontal cortex. Right. So a hit on the head, fairly bad developmental trauma,
Bad
which
birthing.
means that they, it
Yeah.
would, no, it also means that they, yeah, so either during the pregnancy period and in
Yeah.
the first couple of years after, there's some significant traumas,
Yeah.
right? Because in those early stages, it's where the early parts of the brain are developing,
Yes.
and any damage in that time can cause, all of those things, a lack of emotional regulation, because
Yeah.
that's when those parts develop, especially with the mum. It's that oxytocin reciprocation in the first year that should generally cause um, emotional stability.
Yeah. And did you
And so
know
if
that
there's a
there
break
are
in that, all
birthing,
sorts of,
did you know there's birthing medications that actually stop the production of oxytocin?
oh,
So,
that's brilliant.
some people just
Why,
don't
why, why, why
actually,
would that be?
yeah, why would that be?
Some people don't like it.
No, but the drugs actually stop the production of
No.
oxytocin. There's some drugs.
Mm.
So, and sometimes we need to detox the mother so that she can actually get that, that child empathy going properly and get that oxytocin going again,
Well,
because
it's
if
actually
we've
a reciprocal
destroyed,
thing.
sorry?
It's a reciprocal thing that, the mum's normally the primary caregiver, and
Yes,
as they co-regulate each other through reciprocal oxytocin response.
yes,
And that's why it's important, if you can, to get as much time with the mum and the baby as possible before you, embark on a new thing. And the
yeah,
thing is that, that's the ideal thing, but we do the best we can.
yeah,
Like, because there's another thing that called, good enough parenting, because we can't be perfect people. We're also not, we don't want to live through our children either, which there's a lot of some of that going on too.
yeah,
Because we also have to have independent lives, and we've got to work and we've got to do all these things, and we do our best, don't we? But I don't think feeling guilty is, unless you've done something really wrong, feeling guilty is a bit of a, it's a bit of a, maybe it's a trauma response, or, the parental guilt.
yeah,
But it's a frustrating situation because, because the other things we feel is the kids get bullied at school often. Like a Senate inquiry came out on ADHD, and I read through it, and bullying is a key feature of kids who are neurodiverse.
yeah,
They get bullied in the school environment. So the school environment isn't always helpful, right? The schools actually get well paid for it, except a lot of parents experience that I've talked to, they don't really feel like the school's doing much to help their kid at all.
yeah,
Even though once you get a diagnosis, the school gets funding.
yeah,
But there doesn't seem to be a, there doesn't seem to be any framework where I don't know. Maybe they think they shouldn't get special treatment, but you need to at least do that at home.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know,
Because it's your child,
especially if you know the
yeah,
and the school and you're going to be with them for your whole life, and the
yeah,
school's not. You know, one school will be there for maybe 7 years, the other will be for another 7 years, and they don't have any long-term responsibility for the kid. The only person who does is the parents, you know.
yeah,
And so it's up to us to calm down. Like one technique we use in counseling is narrative therapy, where you externalize the problem. And the reason for that is because it's such a issue. Like the kids won't want to go to school, or they're having all of these issues. They're coming home crying after school because they're getting bullied, and
yeah,
it's frustrating. And you're making them go, and they hate it, and all this sort of thing. And it creates a and then if kids get bullied, they often have physical symptoms, like they'll be sick all the time.
yeah. They'll
And it's
get
like, and
anxiety
then they
and
get,
yes,
but
nauseous.
then they get accused of faking illness
Yeah,
when the illnesses that they describe are things like you know, diarrhea, like digestive problems,
yeah,
um, diarrhea, like headaches, coughs. These symptoms are symptoms of bullying. But then what happens is the kid gets told that they're faking it and they've got to go to school.
yeah,
So what happens then in a family systems concept? They're in danger of becoming the scapegoat child. You know, because all families aren't functional. So in dysfunctional family systems or narcissistic family systems, we're not calling people narcissists. We're saying dysregulated family system. And the problem is that so they have roles. So there'll be a golden child, maybe a scapegoat. But the problem is that this kid's in danger of becoming a scapegoat and not being believed for their physical symptoms. You know, when actually, do you know what I mean? These things kind of all mount up into anxiety at home. You've got to go to school and this and that.
yeah.
But the truth is that they're all side effects of what's going on. And so understanding the situation as much as we can is the best way to do it.
Beautiful. What would the top tip be? Yeah, so for parents, they need to understand what's going on with their child and tell them the reason for that is. Why do they need to understand what's going on in their child? Because some parents just go, don't tell me what's going on, just fix him. And, I'm thinking it's not about that. For a start, we've got to reduce the inflammation in the family so that the family can start getting along better. So the benefits of
Yeah.
externalizing the problem, like this is a big thing that you do with your clients.
Yeah. So externalizing the problem, what you do is just say you've got a problem. And the original research on this was by Michael White, the co-founder of narrative therapy, and he had clients. He was working in a mental hospital, and he was in the section where a lot of people were pooing. They had all sorts of endocaprices and those types of bowel problems, and he worked out a way to externalize it. And so what it is, the original one, it was like this kid who had pretty bad soiling issues, right? And so what they did was externalize it, ended up calling it sneaky poo, right? So instead of the person isn't the problem anymore, the problem's the problem. People aren't the problem's the problem. So sneaky poo gets put over here as this oppressive character who hurts kids, makes a mess of everything, and he's over here. And by doing it like that, you make comedy and you start
Right.
making jokes and you take out the seriousness because all this stuff in a family system is really serious.
Yeah.
And the kid goes to school and they're having problems. It's really serious. Everyone's concerned. And the thing is that externalization makes it funny and the kids are laughing and the parents are laughing. Sometimes it's a bit hard to sell to the client when you tell them that's what you're going to do. But actually it's really funny and it takes the seriousness out of the do it too. It's a really good process to work when you learn to externalize problems. And now, like the ADHD problem, if you externalize that, I don't know what you'd call it. You'd call it like I don't know, something like something. You'd give it a nickname, and then all of a sudden you're ridiculing the ADHD problem. Do you
Right.
know what I mean? And it's this thing that causes your kid to have ruined relationships with parents. You know what I mean? It's like this oppressive character. Well, what would be an ADHD? Like AHD. You might call, like in the original one, Michael White did that. The kid didn't know, couldn't say ADHD properly, so he called it AHD. So he'd continue calling it AHD, and everyone thought that was funny.
Yeah,
And so
right.
it's like and so it's a, oh, so ADHD's over here, and AHD does all these things. And so we've got to we've got to stop this ADHD from ruining our whole family.
Nice.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
taking the stress out of it
Yeah, I
is
think
really
that's massively
important.
important.
Yeah, and finding ways to do it
Yeah.
because
Because I
it's
think,
nobody's fault. If our kids are a little bit different, it's not our fault,
yeah,
and it's not anybody's fault. It's just the way that it's sort of working.
yeah. And I
And if we
don't
can get
know
to the
whether
bottom
school
of,
is different now to when I was a kid, but it feels like they've taken a lot of fun out of school. So a lot of the things that we're just,
they
in a
have.
lot of places around the world, there's less music, there's less arts, there's less
Hmm.
activity. So
That's right,
it's
and especially for boys, it's become a lot worse because there's a lot more sitting down time and paying, and girls are much better at doing that.
right.
And so and so girls' marks are getting much better than boys.
Yeah,
And so it's become, and it's like, that's just the way it is at the moment. But for boys, especially boys who are neurodiverse, they want to be out moving around. They want to move. And
yeah,
especially neurodiverse kids, I mean, they've got this energy inside them that keeps moving. It's the only reason their body moves is because they've got this internal vibe that's just like, some of them,
yeah,
different people, and you can tune into that.
yeah,
And, there's this vibe all the time, and it's like working out, more better ways to work with it.
yeah,
But the first thing, self-education, I mean, people complain about the internet and the screens, but I tell you what, if you want to learn about something, if your kid's got an issue, the internet is the greatest place for
yeah,
actually going and finding out, getting clear understanding on it, and also what to do as a parent. There's so much information on what to do as a parent, and
yes,
there's so much free information. But often, if things get critical, you need help, and it's good to
yeah,
get therapy of different types to actually help integrate the disconnection that's happening with the brain. And some things like, if it's a bowel problem, it's kind of a relearning process. Do you know what I mean? Because we have to work with what we've got and then relearn to get the best outcome we can, not only for the kid, but for the whole family.
yeah, yeah,
Because once they're in line, it's not causing, because it can cause problems. It can cause, you got one kid who's emotionally dysregulated, and it does cause problems. And so getting it as smooth as possible, as quick as possible is the best
yes.
approach.
Awesome. Awesome. So guilt is useless. It's sort of learned.
Well,
And the thing about guilt when you think about the map of consciousness is that it's a really low vibration. And what that unconscious part of the brain is trying to do when we feel guilty is not to do the same stupid thing again. So actually, it's a little bit useful if we've done something stupid. Whereas guilt and shame are
yeah,
so similar, but shame is when someone else has lumped something onto you. So we feel shame because of
right.
someone else saying you're a bad student. Whereas if I'm a student who's
Yes,
sitting
that's
at
right.
home not doing my homework, I deserve to feel guilty if I get a crap mark and I wanted to get a good mark. Whereas if the
Right.
teacher's there saying you're this and you're that and your parents, and you're not all of that, and you know in your heart of hearts, why am I being picked on? That is not
Mm.
me, and the
No,
little
that's
brains
true.
need some support to feel better about themselves.
And that's true in psychology theory. It's also guilt isn't as bad as shame. Like guilt can be motivating because
Yes,
sometimes you want to, like, if you do something like wrong, it's good to feel guilty
yes,
because maybe that'll stop doing it again. But when
yes,
it's shame related, shame's just a devastating emotion that is like, that's self-destructive, and we want to get that out of that as quick as we can.
yeah. It's the lowest frequency on the map of consciousness.
Shame is,
Yeah, neutral is
and it's not,
220, just feeling neutral. Shame is 20, guilt is 30,
and
so it's a really low vibration.
but shame's also often
Yes, and that
like
requires
shame
lots
patterns
of,
carry over generational.
yeah.
yeah, lots of care
Yeah.
and deeper listening.
Yeah, totally. Because people have often never had their stories told to someone who has enough empathy to hear it. When they're feeling that shame for years and years and decades, quite often they've just
Hmm.
never got out of it because anyone in their life has heard it all before and they don't want to hear it.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
it doesn't help. It doesn't help.
What does Oprah say? The pain's in the details.
Yeah. Yeah. Awesome. Okay, thank you, David. That was great today. We'll get this
All
out
right,
to
love your work, Manan.
excellent. Take care.